What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 42, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and not as usual, we are joined by Roffle. Corbett's a little bit MIA with some real-life things, but Roffle has graciously, stepped up and joined us for this week's episode. Roffle, thank you again for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
You're welcome. I'm doing pretty well. I was going to lead with an Australian accent, but then I realized I make a fool of myself enough already, so why?
I mean, at this point, now you have to do it. Come on.
No. No. Even in my head, I can't even get a proper one going. Realistically, no, nobody needs to.
All right, you guys in the comments have to give him crap. Make him do it on his stream. Speaking of, for anybody in the WoW community, for some reason who doesn't know who you are, do you want to tell them who is Roffle and what's his Wild Hearthstone story?
Yeah, sure. Wow. So I'm Raffle. I've been playing Wild for 3 to 4 years now. I think I began it with the first Wild Open. At the time, I was playing Hearthstone pretty casually and predominantly Arena. And I saw the announcement for it, and it had very clear rules for who gets to qualify. And I thought, well, sure, I might as well try that. So I queued up Evolve Shaman and just spammed a bunch of Wild Ladder for the first time ever. Got in the top 30 and played in the tournament. So fell in love with the format after that, and I've been playing ever since. Used to play pretty competitively, and now I just kind of play for fun, grab some fun decks, and enjoy myself a little bit. A lot of Yogg shenanigans, a lot of crazy combos, and just generally off-meta decks for a little bit of fun.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know, he is like the face of the WoW format. All right, he's not going to brag, but I'm going to brag for him. He is the Wild guy right now. And so make sure you guys check out his stream and his YouTube channel if you guys haven't already. And before we dive into today's episode, I just want to take a short break here, and I just want to remind everybody to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy our content. It's a small thing, but it does support us a ton. Okay, so Raffle, I want to start off with a little bit of Hearthstone, and I want to say that, admittedly, Corbett and I are a little bit biased, I think, in our analysis of the WoW metagame, because we're both relatively high legend, right? We both frequently are top 100, top 200. Corbett's normally rank 1. And so we're a little bit biased in our analysis. We're always looking for the best decks, the best, most optimized list, what beats, the top 2 or 3 decks. And I don't want to say you're a casual person, right? You don't play casually, but you play, you're not as interested in the best of the best decks. You're more interested in like a diverse array of decks that you can play. And so I kind of want to just ask you, how has the Unnerfs and Forged in the Barrens been for you? Has it expanded? The amount of decks that you've been playing against? Are you having fun?
I think so. Like, obviously, there's always going to be like the best decks that you face a lot of. There's always going to be the most popular decks that you obviously face a lot of as a result of that. So it's like it's kind of an impossibility that there isn't going to be a top tier of deck. But at the same time, I feel like it almost feels like a new format now with the wide breadth of new cards that were introduced between the Unnerfs, between the new Fortune and the Barons cards, which did have a pretty big impact on the WoW metagame, and a new core set. So that's like 3, at least medium-sized injections in the case of the core set and the Unnerfs, as well as one large injection of new cards in Fortune and the Barons. So of course that's going to have a pretty big impact on the Wild meta. More so than if it were just an expansion. So that's a lot of things hitting at once that kind of shook things up quite a bit. So yeah, I've been noticing quite a lot of new decks in Dumpster Legend, and the same typical decks that I'm sure you're seeing, just less frequently.
You've seen more decks, but this is something that I hear a lot from my Twitch chat, and I don't really know from experience. But a lot of people will complain that the gap between these off-meta decks, right? These tier 3, tier 4 decks, and the gap between like those and the tier 1 most powerful decks in the format is just getting increasingly wider. It's a lot harder to win with homebrewed jank. Do you get that feeling as somebody who plays a lot more of these decks than I think anybody else?
No, but there are of course a few exceptions. Like there's it feels like certain matchups are getting more polarized. Combo is getting faster. so you have less of a chance for slow, greedy grinds against them. You can't realistically rely on disruption tools because they're not only comboing faster, but they have more redundancy in those combos. So decks are getting more streamlined, and bad matchups feel more polarized. And I think that's probably more likely what people are experiencing rather than just like an inherent power level distinction between the decks. The meta decks are becoming more refined, but like, I mean, that's inherent with an inherent problem with an eternal format is over time they're just going to get better and better. I don't think that it's impossible to win those if you are reasonable in your deck building, which oftentimes I don't want to be. And so, I do feel that frustration sometimes. So yeah, it's not great to feel helpless when you're playing a Shutterwalk deck against like APM Mage and they kill you before you can even set up half your combo. But like, if you're trying to win a lot of games of Hearthstone, should you be playing that Shutterwalk deck? And so I've gotten better at losing games, I think, as a result of that. And I think that if you're not willing to adjust your deck to the metagame, you that's the reality of it. So that doesn't mean I'm having less fun overall. And it's just, it kind of comes with the territory. And to a certain degree, it always has. Like, even in the past, when you're running up your janky deck on the Legend ladder, you should expect to lose to good decks. Like, that's how it works.
Spitting facts. Good decks will win more, right?
Yeah, and that's fine. There's always going to be good decks. There's always going to be top tier decks. That's the reality of any format, not just Wild.
And so I kind of want to build off of that. Like, you used to be a high legend player. So for those of you guys that don't know, Roffle has hit rank 1 legend multiple times. I think he used to like consistently be top 10, top 20 legend. Do you miss that by any chance? Like, do you miss sometimes playing the best decks and trying to strive for high ranks? I know it's not something you probably like to do frequently, right? Which is why you made the decisions that you have. But do you miss that sometimes?
There are times when I do miss it, but like, then I start doing that thing and start pushing ranks, and I just like, I almost turn into a different person that stops enjoying Hearthstone as much as I do. Like, in some ways, I like the game more when I'm losing, because like I can accept, or when I'm playing a deck that loses often, because I can accept those losses a lot easier. Where when I'm jamming some aggro paladin and trying to get back into the top 100, and I get scammed by mage shenanigans when I shouldn't. I don't know. I have a more visceral response to that than when it just the third time in a row and I don't even get to play cards and I'm dead. That I can accept a little bit easier. I feel like, so it has a lot to do with the mindset that's required to climb for those high ranks. That just, I don't know, doesn't bring me as much joy as it used to. I don't have that competitive drive anymore.
Part of that's really sad though, right? Because I don't know, I am somebody who I have been trying to do my I guess not my brand, but like what I have always enjoyed doing in Hearthstone is like finding that off meta deck, right? That tier 3, tier 4 deck that people are always sleeping on, something like a Libram Paladin or a Token Druid, and like hitting high ranks with that because I've teched it and I've learned how to play against certain matchups. And I find like I'm having the same reaction that you just described, like you don't want to have, right? When I'm playing that deck and I'm trying really, really hard, and then I get scammed on turn 4 by an APM Mage from like 40 health. It feels a lot worse. And so I kind of have adapted a little bit to just like play the good decks, right? Because when you play the good decks, you'll be winning a lot more, and that like kind of will offset. And I guess I've taken a little bit of a different approach. I feel like I've abandoned my identity of like a off-meta streamer recently, just because, like what we mentioned at the top of the show, some of those matchups feel a lot worse than they have in the past.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. But the intent that you're queuing up with is still the same as though you're playing the best deck, right? Like you're still looking to get those wins, even if it is with something like a Libram Paladin or a Token Druid that maybe isn't the top tier. It's still your I guess your enjoyment is kind of tied to the results of the game a lot of the time if you're looking for victories. So, I mean, it's still a competitive mindset, and I don't know. I haven't I guess my understanding of a deck's quality is a little bit different now when I'm used to queuing up something that wins at times wins maybe 40% of the games it plays if it's on a good run. And something like a Libram Paladin Token Druid still has a solid win rate if even if it's queuing into a string of bad matchups.
That's fair. Hearthstone philosophy with Roffle. You love to see it. This is why you're here. As long as I think in general you're still happy with whatever you have, right? I don't know. For me, I love Hearthstone because of that competitive drive and that competitive nature and like trying to climb ranks. That's why like I'm not somebody who loves playing single player content, right? Because there's not that competitive drive. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I will say it definitely does sometimes take a mental toll, and I have to like recalibrate my expectations and my it is a game, right? And so even if I am playing that Libram Paladin and it's not working, or trying to play a different deck and it's not working, it's always just take a deep breath. It's a game, right? Even if I do have that competitive nature.
And it's also a little bit different for me compared to the average player in terms of how I interact with Hearthstone most of the time. Because, when I'm just jamming games by myself, I want to win. That's usually when the competitive drive comes back for me. But, if I lose 5 games in a row but still get a few solid clips with my double Yogg Paladin, that's at the end of the day, that can be considered a success for me, where somebody who's only got limited time to play and wants to either make their first legend push or wants to push for their first top 200 or whatever the case may be, which is a reasonable goal to have. They're not going to have as much time for the losses that I do, or as much patience for it, because they don't do it for their living. I interact with the game a lot differently than your typical player.
I kind of want to use that as like a transition point. I kind of want to jump into your transition into a full-time content creator, if you don't mind. So my first question, like, even though you do stream full-time now and you're constantly creating YouTube content, I find that you're still, whenever I watch your streams and you have those people in Twitch chat that are giving you crap about decks and card choices and stuff like that, I feel like your response is behind that, right? I think you're still able to keep up with the high level scene and what top players think about cards and builds. And so I guess transitioning that to kind of a normal Hearthstone player or listener, like, how are you doing that? Even though you're not participating at High Legend, how are you, keeping up to date and learning about the game and the meta?
I think there are a few facets of that. First of all, like, it's easy to forget, because a lot of my growth has been fairly recent, but like I was playing competitively longer than I was playing, these meme decks that a lot of people are watching now and know me for. So, I mean, there was a few years where, a couple of years straight where I was, in North America, one of the top 5 players in terms of legend finishes on the NA ladder. So that set like a good foundation in terms of my understanding of the game. Hearthstone fundamentals are still fundamentals. Decks are a lot faster, a lot more refined, but at their core, they're doing something similar to kind of what they've always done. So there's like, I guess, a basic understanding of Hearthstone that my experience in playing in the past has helped transition to even now. On top of that, even though if I'm not personally playing meta decks, I'm still interacting with a lot of meta decks from watching my opponents play. And so that gives me an understanding of how the decks play out, even if I don't necessarily jam a lot of games with them myself anymore. And then finally, I consume a fair amount of content. Even if I'm not active in chat, I'm still watching, learning, listening to other creators, yourself, Corbett, as well as I think in general, the quality of player at top legend in Wild right now is a lot better than when I was at top legend in Wild. You have people like Jack, Hejo that create very refined decks very quickly, and so when they speak up about card choices or deck lists, that's the people you want to listen to. Same thing applies with yourself and Corbett. So it's like that information is there. It's even if I'm not directly interacting with it necessarily.
I am flattered. I'm flattered you think that I'm on the same level as Corbett, Nijo, and Jack. I'm a little bit flattered.
Well, I'll also say that the quality of the meta reports is also dramatically improved. I mean, yourself and Corbett are doing great work on the BS report, and look at the Tempo Storm reports have been consistently improving over time as well.
So there's information out there if you want it. I kind of want to jump even a little bit more personal. How is the jump to a full-time Hearthstone content creator been? What's it like? What's the schedule like now that you're not working 40, 50 hours a week on top of streaming and YouTube editing?
The biggest thing I realized is after I stopped doing my full-time job, I'm now just like confused as to how I had time to do everything. Looking at, because I still feel like I'm busy all the time. I'm still waking up at 7 a.m. to start editing videos and then streaming shortly after that. So there's still a sense of urgency in the content creation. It's just like, how did I do this while working a full-time job on top of that? There were days when I was still working, Tuesdays and Thursdays specifically, where from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, every minute of my day was accounted for, including meals, including like travel time to and from work. Everything was like strictly regimented in order to get on time for everything. So I have quite a bit more free time, but I still feel very busy at the same time in terms of the schedule. So it's just like it must just be that I'm getting an adequate amount of sleep now, I think, is the biggest difference in terms of scheduling.
Yeah, and you probably have a little bit more time for the wife and dogs, right? Than you probably used to, which I think is very important.
Agreed. And some of that was starting to come back, just working from home to begin with. But now it's like it's a whole nother level. I can take them for longer walks after streams. I can actually contribute to housework around the house, and do some cleaning and whatnot. So it's definitely been a huge improvement for my both mental and physical life. I mean, that's not to say there aren't any stresses involved with full-time content creation, but like the fact that I'm not doing both right now just is a huge improvement in terms of all of that.
That sounds amazing. I'm really happy that it's like working out for you. When you made that announcement that you were going full time, I don't think I've ever been like, I don't want to say prouder, but like I was like, damn, he deserved it, and I'm like really, really, really happy that it's happening for you, and it's excited to see like your growth and everything that's happened, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was it was very stressful at the time, and I was a nervous wreck, to be honest with you, because I was leaving a stable job with a secure income, and like I have responsibilities as an adult that's probably a little bit older than most people that are making that jump. So like there was definitely risk that I felt at the time, and it took me a long time to make the decision and pull the trigger, and honestly kind of a lot of convincing from my wife too. Were
you trying to convince her, or was she trying to convince you that you could do it?
She was trying to convince me. She was trying to make me make the transition a lot sooner than I did, because she saw how stressed and miserable I was trying to balance both. And she knew that the content creation side of things made me a lot happier than the full-time job that I was doing, which was a great job. I had it pretty great there. It just wasn't something that I enjoyed nearly as much as the YouTube and streaming.
Shout out to Roses. I mean, let's talk a little bit more like professionally. So you've had the opportunity to have a couple of videos highlighted on the Blizzard launcher. Like I said, you're kind of the face of Wild right now. And so how has that been? How is it, do you think that comes with additional stress, as like being the guy for Blizzard when it comes to Wild? And, how are you dealing with all of that?
I don't it's a privilege. It's there's stress involved because I had to do additional content for those videos like shortly after release, but like that stress, is just a part of the job, and really the benefit of that is that there's more visibility not only for myself but for the Wild community as a whole. It's one of the first times that they've actually had, like, since the maybe first or second Wild Open when they had control on the Blizzard launcher. Like, it's been a while since they've had featured Wild creators, so I consider it a privilege. The fact that it results in extra work is something that's kind of silly to complain about, right? That's part of the job. So oddly enough, though, like, the impact of that is not necessarily short term, because in the past 2 years, I think that the worst performing videos on my channel have been the two that have been featured on the launcher, simply because it's a little bit different content than my audience is used to consuming. But like, there's value in having that Blizzard promotion that isn't just the views that it immediately gets. It's the name recognition. Honestly, there's it's the earned media associated with that. The people recognize me and recognize Wild as a more legitimate format because Blizzard is doing, a little bit more to promote it on a more regular basis.
So, speaking on the topic of representation, I don't know if you wanted to say, a few words based upon the issues that were kind of, popping up in the past week in terms of women's representation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's an important topic to discuss. It's something that's come up a few times on stream, and I think that, they have underperformed on this. Not only in terms of inclusion of women, but across the board on people of color as well as LGBTQ and the community associated with that. Like, it's I'm always a little bit hesitant to, I guess, speak to this conversation because there are enough white male voices talking about this, but like, I guess my perspective is that it's easy to say representation doesn't matter when you're already being represented, when you're the prominent when you look to the prominent figures and you see yourself reflected in that. So as a white male, it's like it's unfair to be dismissive when you're already benefiting from representation in a way. So when people are saying that, hey, we would like to see more female content creators, like, you should probably maybe take a step back and listen a little bit and better understand what it is that they're trying to say and why it is important for, I guess, better inclusion and representation. A common misconception associated with, the topic of representation is that when you're lifting somebody else, you're pulling somebody else down. And that's like, I don't know, that's a really short-term way of looking at things, when the fact that you're bringing people up isn't to pull people down. It's to, like, widen the potential audience. And, again, the emphasis should be on lifting those people up rather than assuming that people are getting, something taken away from them. That's not how it's happening. That's not the intention. And that's like I don't know, again, a really short-sighted and, I don't know, unhelpful way of looking at things, I suppose. There is no scarcity when it comes to this type of situation. There's no scarcity when it comes to views for creators or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's just not how it works, right? Like, it's not a, set, like, 100%. Like, if you take away 20% from this one person and give it to somebody else, then that person's losing. That's not really how it works. Nicolina had a really, really awesome stream, and it was actually honestly like a little bit of depressing stream, where she talked about kind of all of these issues, like kind of like a community, like town hall, and it was just kind of staggering, like the growth that a streamer will see just from being in one of these events. Like, they don't get paid for that, but just the exposure and introducing people to those streams was like a massive jump in income and viewership.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt, but it kind of becomes a self-perpetuating cycle too. If if women or whatever group you're talking about aren't being invited to these events, they aren't getting the representation, which means they aren't as recognizable, which means they then, aren't getting the view count, which means they can then justify not inviting those people. And it just creates this cycle where we end up with the same creators in all of the events again. And what you mentioned or what Nicolina mentioned rather is similar to what I was talking about with the Blizzard launcher. Like, again, those videos didn't do well, but that doesn't mean they weren't valuable, because I got the visibility. Like, people saw my face when they went to open Hearthstone. Like, there's value in that, in the same way that getting invited to these events has a lot of value, and it does a lot to lift creators up. We saw that with Slissa in a recent Battlegrounds tournament.
I 100% agree, and I want to take a little bit here to shout out some awesome people. So, like, Ali, she was one of the 2 women that were initially invited to this event. I don't want to talk about too many details, but she did a lot of work behind the scenes to kind of influence that response from Blizzard, where they were going to aim for 25% women representation in invitational tournaments moving forward, which I think was a huge step. So shout outs to Ali, and then also shout outs, of course, to Regis and Crip, who kind of took a huge step and kind of giving up their invites to this tournament that had a lot of money, and giving up their spots for Aveline and Luna, which was a huge deal. So I just wanted to shout out to those 3, and of course I think just echo what Roffle has been saying, where representation matters, right? No matter what you may think of your position. And a common response that I always saw was that if they deserved to be there, they would be getting invites. And the thing is there's like 30, 40, 50 streamers that are worthy of invites, right? And so making sure, especially for an invitational, I hate that argument for invitationals, by the way, but there are many people out there that are deserving of recognition from the community, and the more people that you recognize, right, the more people are willing to watch different streamers, right? Like, I've seen Crip, I've seen Regis, I've seen Dog 100,000s of times. I love their content, but I might also get exposed to somebody else, right? So when those 3 people aren't on, there's another streamer for me to watch. And so what that means is that the community as a whole is growing, and that benefits everybody from the top to the bottom.
Exactly. That's a really good point. And first of all, you cannot tell me that Aveline and Luna did not deserve to be in that competition. Like, that's just hard stop right there. They picked great people to bring into that tournament. And, again, props to Regis and Grip for stepping away and recognizing that they have had a lot of time in the limelight, and, maybe they can do something to give other people a chance. And yeah, like you said, representation does matter. It's really basic human psychology that we like to see ourselves reflected in people that are in prominent roles or are prominent figures within a community. And like you said, the inviting people that are representative of a broader demographic are going to bring more people to the game, which is a good thing for the community as a whole. And so, again, looking at it as pulling somebody else down rather than pushing people up is just too short-sighted a way of looking at things.
Agreed. I really hope, I want to wrap this up, I really do hope that Blizzard kind of stays true to their word, right? They committed to this, and I really hope they stay true.
That was the big thing, and that's like more than Aveline and Luna getting invited. The big thing is the statement that they made and the commitment that they made, because that's now something that people can point back to if they don't deliver on that.
Yeah. And so one last thing to kind of wrap up the personal Q&A that we have kind of turned this into. As a full-time content creator, what are your hopes and goals moving forward? For yourself, or for the WoW format, or in anything?
That's a tough question, and not one like. It feels like a lot of times content creation is just trying to get the next thing out. So I don't quite get to the time to sit back and reflect on things in the future, especially since like it's still mind-boggling to me that my face was on the launcher twice now. That that like people, that as many people as they do watch my videos. Like, it's still, I don't know that, like, setting goals feels like I'm asking for more when I already have more than I imagined, 1 or 2 or even 6 years ago, or even 6 months ago. I don't know. Like, my hope is that I can maybe bring more people to the Wild format that that otherwise wouldn't even consider it a legitimate game mode, so that they can see that there's some fun to be had there. And then on top of that, bringing people maybe to a different mindset when it comes to Hearthstone as well, that not everybody needs to take it as seriously as some people do, and that you can have some fun even if you're losing.
Yeah. Now let's wrap this up. Let's tie it a little bit back to Hearthstone, because we kind of went off the deep end here, which I think was great. I think our conversation has been amazing. But let's wrap it up with, what is your favorite card in Hearthstone? What is your favorite, in the history of Hearthstone, what's your favorite card and what's your favorite deck, if you had to pick one? Just so that people can pick on you down in the comments.
I can't even, so this is a question I get a lot when I'm streaming, and I legitimately never know how to answer. The reality is that I play a different deck, or enough decks to upload a unique video every day of the year. And so I just don't get attached to decks. I think with new in terms of cards, I enjoy doing silly things with the new Yogg, I think, most of all. I like him a little bit better than the old Yogg, just because he has the 5% chance for 5% for
Rod of Roasting. Yeah.
Rod of Roasting. And as much as punishing as it was the first time I tried to pull that off on day one of Dark Moon Fair.
You looked miserable doing that. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm not gonna lie. I was miserable. I was just I was devastated that I could not get it to work. But in terms of favorite deck,
if you had to pick one in the entire history of Hearthstone,
okay, it would probably be. I'm really gonna get roasted here. It'd probably be something involving Priest. I think maybe
here.
Either, if I know you said one, but either Weasel Priest, just because I love the torture aspect. We've talked about it before, but I'm a former mono black control gamer who loves disrupting the opponent's hand, and weasels and birds are some of the best way to do that in Hearthstone. Or I really like the old, well, not old anymore because they unnerfed Power Word Shield, but the Miracle Priest with Test Subject shenanigans, where you can draw through your deck on turn 4. Because that's the other thing I love in card games, is just drawing outrageous amounts of cards.
I don't think anybody would say that they hate drawing cards.
I'm sure there's always somebody.
Unless I'm playing as Milrow, then I hate drawing cards. But
yeah, but I don't know. There's being able to do several actions on a turn just feels good, and then there's a lot of different win conditions you can do with that. You can do a Chef Nomi. You can just stack Grave Horrors and send them at your opponent's head. You can get in Zeth active on turn 3 or 4 when you run a deck full of duplicates. So there's just a lot of fun in that deck. It's not very good, but I always enjoyed it.
I always imagine the what is it, the Divine Spirit Inner Fire combo with the Boar, where you would draw through your entire deck and then OTK somebody with 1,000 attack Boar. That was pretty sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually preferred the Velens combo when Holy Smite went phase. But that was a slightly different draw engine, I think, just because things were a little bit slower back then in WoW. But I did enjoy that deck, just because seeing people struggle through the turns was always a good time, trying to space out hand size and whatnot, because I know I personally struggled with that. I guess a third deck that I would throw out there is I used to get a lot of top 50, top 25 finishes with Dead Man's Hand Warrior back when that had just rotated. And that was a deck that I don't think it's a complicated one, but it was so different than what most decks were doing at the time that it did take a while to wrap your head around. Once you figured out the patterns, it was pretty repetitive and somewhat linear in terms of what it was doing, but I don't know, it's still rewarding in that initial learning phase.
I mean, I think it was a lot less linear back in the day, right? Because that was before Ankar, Risky Skipper, Barov were things, right? You were running Dry Whisker Armor or whatever the 2/2 is called to gain life.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe it's just me being dumb, but I think the deck was a lot easier to pilot back then than it is now. When you had to map out your risky skippers into your battle rages and your, I don't know, the angry rush guy that costs less for damage. Like, I think that I think it's more complicated to play now, and maybe that's just a lack of repetition from my side.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Priest and Dead Man's Hand. How are we friends? Gosh.
Some of my most popular videos are also Mill Rogue, so yeah, I feel like
I'm being targeted
like
here.
Miracle, yeah.
All right, so let's. I think everybody appreciates you opening up a little bit about the Q&A, so we appreciate that. But let's move into a little bit of wild news. And let's start off with some pretty big news. So if in case you guys haven't heard, Solemn has basically retired from Wild Hearthstone and kind of Hearthstone content creation in general. I highly recommend you guys check out his video if you guys haven't already. But essentially it boiled down to he realized that Hearthstone wasn't making him happy. And he, huge shout outs to Solemn for the kind of self-awareness that takes, because not everybody has that. At realizing that Hearthstone, streaming Hearthstone was kind of what was causing that unhappiness. And so he's moved on. The Wild community is going to miss you. I think Dane, Roffle, and Solemn were like the three Wild musketeers, and we're losing a really, really prominent figure in the community, which sucks. But I think his current plans are moving on to streaming some Pokemon content, and I wish him the best of luck.
Yeah, it's I think that it's been fairly clear for a while now that maybe he hasn't been enjoying Hearthstone all that much. So yeah, it's like you said, it takes some self-awareness to recognize that that's the problem, and to I think it takes some courage as well to make that leap, because Hearthstone is a game that's somewhat notorious in terms of content creators for the audience not necessarily transitioning well to other games. Mm-hmm. So it's certainly a risk that he's taking. So I mentioned how stressful that it was for me to leave my job and take that leap. I imagine it's very similar for him to make that change. So I wish him the best of luck. But one thing that in my interactions with Solemn, I've noticed is that he's very, very well aware of like some of the more technical aspects of content creation and what it takes to be successful. So I'm sure that he has, the necessary knowledge and tools to make that leap a success.
Yeah, and as bad as this might sound, I really wish him the best of luck with Pokemon content creation so that he doesn't have to come back to Hearthstone, right? Because Hearthstone wasn't making him happy, and I hope that Pokemon gives him the ability to not have to come back, like he still gets, enough viewership and support via that in order to not have to come back, because I think that'd be something that really sucks, having to come back to something that you don't enjoy, something that makes you, not happy. But I really, really wish him the best of luck, and it's kind of sad. He had a huge wild population and supportive, fan base that's gonna miss him.
Yeah, it's objectively bad for the Wild community, right? He's the prominent figure that introduced a lot of people to the format. Again, the short-sighted view for somebody like you or me is, oh, hey, more views for me because nobody's watching Solemn anymore. But the reality is that no, he reached a lot of people that you and I or other Wild creators didn't reach and wouldn't have reached, and brought them into the format. So it's for the broader Wild community, it's a big hit and it's a bummer. But I do personally wish him the best, because I know that he's likely going to be a lot happier playing Pokemon now rather than Hearthstone.
So for the next part of our Wild news recap, we're going to be covering some really important comments from Ixar during his most recent Q&A. He actually just finished this up right before we're recording the podcast, so perfect timing. But he did talk about a lot of things that are kind of relevant to the Wild format, as well as some kind of bigger picture, Hearthstone content to dive into. But the first thing that I want to start off with is the thing that's on everybody's mind, because everybody hates APMH. But this question was asked: are there any plans about rebalancing Wild? APMH really takes the fun out of my favorite format. It's like Naga Sea Witch all over again, but even worse. And so Ixar replied, no changes planned currently. I play a significant amount of Wild, and I'd say that the most busted feeling things are definitely APMH and Darkglow Warlock. APMH got a population jolt due to some Barons cards, so still waiting to see how the meta settles. So this sounds like, first of all, Ixtar currently is top 50 Legend Wild. I don't think we can ever use the argument that the devs don't play the format ever again. I know that not everybody did, but I've seen that argument before, so we can't say that anymore. But it looks like currently no wild balance is planned. But I guess APM Mage and Darkler Warlock, hit those feelings of decks that they've nerfed in the past, right? Those really unfun, swingy feelings. And so I guess if they are going to nerf things, it might be in something like one of those two decks.
I don't think that his response is going to be well received, just because of the words that it says being different than what people want them to say. But it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. This has kind of been their stance on the Wild format for quite a while now. But to me, it reads as though they're keeping an eye on those two decks. He's aware of the fact that they are as the second half. That shouldn't be a surprise, as the APM Mage and Dark Glare feel busted. So we've all known that for some time now. So at least there's mutual understanding in that regard, and there's some visibility in terms of the Hearthstone dev team on what's broken in the Wild format. So I think him playing the format is objectively a good thing for the format, right? Just because it's giving that visibility for it within a prominent member of the development team. But I think this is pretty much in line with kind of their stated vision of the Wild format for quite a while now. You may not agree with it, but it should not be a surprise. Every time a question like this comes out, and every time we get a response like this, there's a whole wave of surprise Pikachu faces. But we know this by now. So I think if we want to see change in this, we need to communicate that we want to see it changed. Or if what we're looking for is more regular balance changes in Wild, and do so civilly. But again,
civilly, the big word. Civilly is
right, right. And I think that a lot of the voices that get left out in this discussion are actually the less engaged members of the community that feel that have the negative feelings about those nerfs. That those are the less engaged members of the Hearthstone player base that that I occasionally do interact with, that happen upon my YouTube videos and happen into my streams, and really dislike it when their cards or decks get nerfed. So I don't think that those are there's kind of an echo chamber inherent in communities like Reddit and Twitter, where people are actively engaging with Hearthstone content.
Yeah. I mean, let's extend the nerf talk a little bit further. So Venom asked, "Don't you think Crab Rider is too overpowered?" I echo Venom's sentiment here. I think Crab Rider is busted. I thought Flying Machine was insane, and then they printed a 2-mana version that had Rush, and I cried a little bit.
Wait, but Flying Machine was always 2 mana because Mech Warper.
Okay, well, imagine if they had a Murloc Warper, and how insane Crab Rider would be then.
Yeah, no, it's and imagine if Murlocs Murlocs do kind of have magnetic because they buff each other. So yeah.
Anyways, XR replied to this. He says, "Not yet," which is crazy. No, he says it's an early to mid-game card for minion style of control decks. It's different, but not completely different from cards like Firefly, Tar Creeper, Sludge Belcher. Cards like that promote onboard fighting and punish decks that don't engage. So, very, very interesting comment. Do you have thoughts here?
I'm curious to see I'm curious as to how Crab Rider plays in Standard, because it does play to this or play like this in some matchups, but I don't know. It's kind of reminiscent of it, especially now with the Call to Arms on Nerf. It's kind of reminiscent of how jugglers used to be off of the Call to Arms poll, where whoever gets the best juggles or the most jugglers off of Call to Arms wins the game. Now it's kind of like that same thing, but with Crab Riders, and who can get the most or buff the best Crab Rider kind of dictates a lot of early game aggro mirrors. So yes, the card punishes control decks that don't interact with the board, but it also punishes other aggro decks that don't draw their Crab Riders in time,
Yeah, it's very much it feels like a very swingy card, right?
Exactly.
it feels like you always want to be like the second person to play a crab rider so that you can answer the first person's crab rider because it happens to be the most efficient way to answer it because it has rush.
Right. In Wild, at least, the problem that I have with Crab Rider is in the aggro mirrors, not in the aggro control matchups.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you removed rush from the card, I think it would still be pretty damn strong. Like it would be a lot weaker, right? Because the Wind Fury is what makes buffs on Crab Rider like so powerful, right? So it is very powerful against the slower decks in that regard. But then the rush would remove like the huge swinginess of like, oh, I had a Crab Rider to answer your super early like powerful early game thing. Oh, you didn't have a Crab Rider? Guess I can snowball from here because now I buff my Crab Rider and the Wind Fury is kind of bonkers.
Yeah, and if you even if it keeps the rush, like why does it have 4 health?
Yeah, 100% agree.
Like even like a 2-mana 1/4 Wind Fury, like that's bonkers already. And then you give it rush, so it just like it has. You're paying too little mana for that card is really what it comes down to for the stats and the effects that you get.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for it to be a 2-mana 1/3 because the same reason that they nerfed Watch Post, right, was because I can't interact with it, crying face emoji. But like when you couldn't deal with the Watch Post, the downside of that was like so much better than leaving a Crab Rider unchecked because if you leave a Crab Rider unchecked, you're dead.
Right,
like, it's not even a joke.
Can't interact with anything if you're dead.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird for me to hear not yet. I think Crab Rider is very much overtuned. Like, don't get me wrong, I love that Handbuff Paladin is a deck, and I love that like Rush Galakrond Warrior is like finally becoming a deck. But it's very much off of the back of kind of Crab Rider and how busted that is. I would be very interested in seeing how it's performing in Standard because, like, I mean, that Crab Rider Hand of a Doll Conviction combo is like it's in Standard, and you still have Sword with Oh My Yogs in Standard. I'm very interested to see if aggro Paladin is kind of busted in Standard.
It does seem like it's being included in quite a lot of decks in Standard, and those decks have a pretty good win rate according to HS Replay. So, yeah, I like normally. When Ixar speaks up and talks, like he's very clearly well informed when it comes to topics of game design. Like there's no doubt about that. I would tend to disagree with his assessment here just because I don't, which I rarely do, but I don't think that the strength of the card is in the, that aggro control matchup that seems to be implied here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he mentioned it as like it's a control tool for those like aggro board-based decks, which.
Oh, I see. I just misread that.
Yeah, which is true. It's just like it's
true.
An insanely powerful tool.
But I think it's ratcheted up a notch compared to those cards that he mentioned in like. Yeah, I think in that regard, maybe Tar Creeper is a fair comparison, but like the upside ends up being a lot higher if you can stick a Crab Rider because of the damage output that it does when compared to something like a Tar Creeper.
Yeah. So we'll see. I think we're very far from any formal announcement of nerfs or even talking about nerfs. But that's just a little bit of feedback from Ixar regarding kind of state of the balance in the format. And then the next thing, the reverse of nerfs. Somebody asked, would the team ever do a round of buffs for Wild? And so Ixar responds, not something I'd be very excited for. Part of Wild is to look into the history of Hearthstone. It's not supposed to be a place where all cards are similar power level. Also, in order to impact Wild at all, you have to buff cards to pretty extreme power levels. What do you think about this statement?
Okay. The people are, I don't know, I have a disagreement here with the broader Hearthstone community that I don't know that buffs are inherently better than nerfs. Like, I don't, like, when you talk about card changes, I think you want to look broadly at the impact that it has on the metagame as a whole, not on those individual cards necessarily. So, like, why? I guess I've never heard a strong argument for why buffing a card is better than nerfing a card, other than there's a positive change being made. I guess is like, so I don't know. I would like to see. I would like to see more, maybe a little bit more regular changes to the Wild format in general, regardless of what they are. So, like the unnerfs obviously had a big impact on the format, and that was something that was good. I don't know what cadence that should be on or how regular it should be, because again, we talked about there are people that really don't like it when their cards get changed, and like those people's feelings about the game are important too. But like, I think it's clear with the current content cycle that there gets to be a period on a fairly regular basis where the wild community is generally fatigued with the way that the cards and decks currently are, and so I think more frequent changes, whatever they might be, would be good. And I guess I don't see why buffs are inherently better than the nerfs. I think any change has the potential for an equal net gain or loss in terms of the format as a whole.
Yeah, I guess I disagree a little bit here with you, and especially with Ixarg. I think for me, I'm always in the boat of I want more decks to be viable, right? If they're a tier 3 or tier 4 deck, I still consider that viable, right? Because you can play it, you can have an above average win rate on ladder, you can probably hit legend with the deck, right? And I think right now, as a result of the unnerfs plus forge plus the new core set, we've had maybe the biggest or the largest amount of decks that are competitive, right? I think I could name 30, 40 decks that you could hit legend with very easily, which is, I think, awesome. For me, when I think of buffs, I think about buffing those like key payoff cards, right? So like something like they did with Menagerie Warden for Beast Druid, when it got buffed for the new core set. I think that's like the step that I would like to take. I would like to see a change to something like Marabi, right? Like these underplayed archetypes that were kind of there, even with all the help that they've gotten, aren't wild viable. And I don't think that is going to like, I'm not worried about Beast Druid all of a sudden becoming tier 1 because you buffed like Knight of the Wild or something like that. I'm interested in like more decks being viable, so that way that there's something for anybody that enjoys playing the format, right? There's always a deck for somebody.
Right. So like, I guess I understand that in theory. And first of all, I don't know that there's an iteration of Marabi that makes the card viable. Like, just because of the words that are on his card. Yeah. But for something like Beast Druid, I think that theoretically, it's better when more decks are viable. So I guess I do understand that. But how is buffing cards materially different than just like printing more support in the future for those cards? Or what happens if we, to Ixar's point, buff cards so much that in order to make them playable in the format that they end up being the new meta decks and push out other decks? Because that's often what happens when archetypes get their power level increase that were maybe fringe before. They end up pushing other archetypes out. That's what we saw with Seeker Mage over the course of introducing new cards to it over the span of multiple expansions. So I guess how is buffing cards materially different than just like printing new support for those archetypes?
Well, I would say I can see the cards that could potentially get buffed. I can't see what's in the pipeline of cards to be released, and so therefore buffs are something that I want. Obviously, I would love like the Murloc Shaman support that they printed this expansion. I loved it, like because it made Murloc Shaman a deck again, right, when it previously wasn't. And they printed some elemental support, which is like it made it a little bit better, but not all the way. And so like I don't know what's in the pipeline, right? But like I know that hey, Beast Druid would be a lot better if Knight of the Wild worked like Thing from Below, which it doesn't currently, right? Or I don't know, Totem Shaman or something like that, right? Like it's a deck that's like very fringe, it's not very good, but if you gave me one card, I don't even know what card you would buff, and you gave me a buff and it would make the deck a little bit better, because that's stuff that I can see, and so that's stuff that I can talk about and want and wish for, where I can't really see what's necessarily down the pipeline. So I guess that's maybe the difference there. But like you said, I'm all down for more frequent changes, whether they are buffs or nerfs or just new content that's being released. Like I'm also kind of in the boat of like one day I would like to see like a wild specific like expansion or mini set. That like maybe that's how you print the support without breaking standard, right? You print some nuts beast druid support or something in this mini set, so that those decks become viable or better. Like I think we are very far from that point. I don't think that it's going to happen anywhere in the near future, but that's I am in that small population of people that would just like love more changes. But that's also because I consume a ton of WoW content. So
yeah, and I think that we kind of got a taste of that with the unnerfs. That was a small pocket of cards that was exclusive to Wild that changed the format that had a positive impact. I think that hopefully what precedent that set was, and what I think we can both agree on, is that some amount of regular change is generally good. Like I said, like there is in the current content release cycle, there is some fatigue that players are rightfully feeling within the Wild format when the same decks remain at the same power level for months on end.
Yeah, and so I think people will always say like that's Wild, but also like part of the experience I think is, yes, Odd Paladin can be a deck, and if I enjoy playing Odd Paladin, I can always come back and play Odd Paladin. But I'm okay if Odd Paladin is not the best deck for literally 4 straight years, right? And I would be okay with a little bit of shake-up of what I am playing against. But yeah, so that's enough talk about nerfs and buffs. I feel like we're going to talk about this every other week moving forward until we see some changes actually happen. But the next couple questions are kind of how do you want to call this? This is like Hearthstone mechanics questions. So the question is, more counterspells in the game? When or if? I've always wondered why such a common card game mechanic is only on one card after all of these years. Ixor replies, if we do, they will probably be one-ofs. Hearthstone's really light on the mean stuff, and counterspell is in that category for sure. When we do make mechanics that mess with your opponent's things, they are usually weak and still cause much distress, like Ticketus and Oh My Yogg. I know we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. I know you had some opinions on this response from Ixar.
Yeah, I don't agree with putting Ticketus and Oh My Yogg in the same sentence in terms of card quality and their relative power levels. But like I understand what he's saying, and this has kind of been Hearthstone philosophy for a long time. I think they've opened it up a little bit, honestly, since like the Ben Burod days, where they were really reluctant, or seemed reluctant to introduce disruption tools. I talked earlier, I like disruption tools, but I also understand that they need to be weak, otherwise creates for a miserable experience. It's kind of this weird interaction I see within the community, where there are some people, like the person asking this question, that do want to interact. Really what the like Counterspell and Oh My Yogg do is they give you an opportunity to interact with your opponent's turn when you wouldn't otherwise be able to. Not necessarily in a direct way, but in an indirect way. So there are people that often call for this, but then when it's introduced, it's not necessarily that fun. So yeah, I understand the hesitation for it, and I don't know. I don't disagree with his assessment on this, other than the fact that Oh My Yogg is a little bit stronger than like a just kind of feels bad man type situation. Like it can be super disruptive at a very low cost, not only in terms of its mana cost, but also like you're often not even paying a card for it. So like the ease at which you get that disruption into play is also maybe a little bit problematic in Paladin right now. But I don't know. It's weird giving Paladin a tool to to be so disruptive.
I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I love disruption tools just because Hearthstone, like, fundamentally doesn't allow you to interact with your opponent very easily, right? There is no instant speed interaction. Mm-hmm. And so, especially in the WoW format, I love stuff like Watch Post and Oh My Yogg. And honestly, as much as I hate playing against Elucia, like, that's an effect that I feel like was very much needed. I wish it was like a rogue card instead of a priest card, but like Dirty Rat, Lotheb, the amount of Reddit posts that I have seen about Lotheb and complaining about how busted that card is, and I'm just like, bro, this is like the best card to ever exist. Otherwise, you're going to have more big priests, more Mali druids, more APM mages. Imagine the format without stuff like Lotheb or Cold Neophyte. So like, I am all about interaction with the opponent. The ability to stop your opponent from doing some dumb, stupid, broken thing, I think is very powerful, and I am all for it. I will also say, Ticketus does not stop your opponent from doing dumb, powerful things. Ticketus sucks, and you guys should stop playing in arena lock decks. But stuff like Oh My God, Counterspell, like I said, as much as I hate playing against Elucia, like it's a very powerful disruption tool, and I think the format is better off with it in the format.
That is a bold statement. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I don't know that I would be willing to throw that out into the,
I have been very open about my like appreciation for disruption tools. Like I have also been very open with the fact that like from the very beginning, Elucia probably should have been a rogue card. It just like it kind of fits like the rogue thematics, other than like the stealing your thing, but like that's also like a rogue thing as well as a priest thing. But
yeah, I think the problem with it in a class like priest is that it gives priest the ability to do something that it shouldn't be able to do. Like
it covers the biggest weakness of priest.
Exactly, priest should die to combo. So like giving it a single card that shores up that is kind of like giving Secret Mage AoE in the form of Flak Mage or Flame Ward. You know, like we don't need to shore up an every weakness that a class may have. So,
but yeah, I think in general though, I'm very happy that they print disruption, and I hope that they like don't shy away from it. To be complete, like I we're talking 2 years in the future, but I really hope that they unnerf Watch Post back to 2/4, because I think the format was like. I think it was better off with a 2/4 Watch Post in the format.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm fully on board with that. Like I like you, I love disruption tools. I think that if nothing else, they give you something to consider. Even if you can't directly interact with them, you can at least consider them before you make your choices. And I think that that's interesting. And I'm kind of into removing cards from my opponent's hand or counterspelling, whatever. Like I want to disrupt my opponent's stuff. I want to that's fun for me. It doesn't need to be a top tier strategy, but I want to be able to do it. And so I think I'm all for introducing those mechanics as well. But there is a critical mass that you can hit with those types of cards that make the game unfun to be on the receiving end of too many times in a row.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, and so let's move on. I know we're running a little bit long here, but one last kind of Hearthstone mechanics question. Speaking about game modes, hi XR, can we consider a Hearthstone tower defense in future game modes? XR replies, I'd love to. I really want to explore a Mario Party style game mode with Battlegrounds tech where players go into an 8-player match and play mini games with one another. Things like tower defense are good fits for role players in that mode. This is just Dreamland for now. That was actually really hard to say. All I can say about this comment is yes, please to both. Just like a pure tower defense game and like a Mario Party. Like I would play the hell out of those games. Those sound like so much fun.
Yeah, I'm into that too. I like the idea of Hearthstone being like more almost a platform for games at this time. The one thing that gives me a little bit of hesitation though is sort of the limited infrastructure associated with that though, because you're kind of limited within building things in Hearthstone. So something like a Mario Party style game mode where it's meant to be more social, if there's no in-game chat, that kind of takes away from it a little bit, so you have to use a different tool, which most people have, but like that's just another hurdle that you have to face for that. So I'm excited about it. Like I'm not going to let that take away from the excitement of that. I'm looking forward to Mercenaries and the other game modes that they're working on, but like thinking about it long term, I would love for in addition to just adding things to Hearthstone, I would love like a expansion on like the underlying foundation of like Hearthstone if it's going to become a platform for many other games.
Hearthstone 2.0, right?
I mean, I realize that what I'm asking for is like a massive, massive undertaking and probably never going to happen. But I just wanted to throw that out into the world that it would be great to have that.
I 100% agree. I also want to say that like I love what you mentioned about like Hearthstone becoming a platform for other kinds of games because of what we mentioned with Solemn earlier, where like Hearthstone communities generally don't consume content outside of Hearthstone, and so multiple ways to play games or different types of games like Battlegrounds like a tower defense game within Hearthstone, I feel like will help you maintain that viewer base, hopefully, right?
Yeah, it also goes back to what we talked about, diversity and representation as well, where you're appealing to a broader audience that brings more people into Hearthstone as a whole, as a community. You can, like we saw that with Battlegrounds, where it brought people that were maybe league players or whatever the case may be. However, they got introduced to TFT or auto battlers in general, it brought them either to Hearthstone or back to Hearthstone because it's a really successful auto battler. So
yeah. Battlegrounds is one of the best things to happen to Hearthstone in a long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
100%.
And I haven't even played it in quite a while myself, but I fully acknowledge that. Absolutely.
Yeah. 100% agreed. All right. That's going to wrap up our news segment. One last thing to touch on. So I don't know if this has been formally announced. So this might be a leak of information, and I apologize in advance if it is. But Zeddy is actually hosting a Wild tournament, like a Wild Open style tournament, similar to what Solemn hosted last year. And I think the tentative date is actually on May 8th. There are not very many details, widely available right now, but it is going to be open to anybody to compete, right? So you don't have to qualify for this event. If you want to play in it, you can sign up and you can play. I'm not sure the format or anything like that, but like I said, I think expect something very similar to Solemn's Wild tournament. Keep an eye out on Zeddy's Twitter or YouTube channel for some announcements that I assume are coming soon, which is awesome. I think Wild tournaments, the more the merrier. I think right now, the closest thing that we have is like Team Hearth Legends or THL, like their weekly league tournament that they have going on. But I mean, if Zeddy has put together a prize pool and a team to help run this tournament, I think I'm really, really excited, and I will probably be competing in it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, again, giving people that want it the opportunity to compete is a good thing. Like I mentioned at the top of the podcast that the way that I got introduced to the Wild format was through the Wild Open. So, it's. I think it's a good thing for the community to have those types of competitive outlets.
Yeah, so make sure you guys keep an eye out on his Twitter, YouTube for announcements that are probably coming soon. I hope I didn't spoil too much. I really apologize if I did. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for our episode tonight. Raffle, again, thank you so much for stepping in for Corbett this week, and I really appreciate it. It was a fun episode.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Last time I was on the podcast, I actually correctly predicted the fact that Secret Mages would stop running Alunith. And, both you and Corbett humored me on that. But I could tell that you were both looking at me like I was crazy. So I realistically, I just came back here to gloat about that. So.
All right. So now do you have any other hot takes, right? If you predicted that like 6 months ago, do you have any other hot takes on the next new card that's going to break the Wild format?
No.
Right.
I'm just going to live and die by that one. and never let either of you hear the end of it.
Okay, to be fair, we did say you're gonna run Sage, you're gonna run Fair Game, but there's no way you cut Alunith, right? Because it's that broken. So we weren't 100% doubting you, but I mean, we were also kind of 100% doubting you. I think we both were just like, nah, dude, you don't cut Alunith. Honestly, that's a pretty good one to go out on. If you're never gonna make any more predictions ever again, that's probably a really, really, really good one to go out on. I appreciate you hanging out with me tonight. For those of the people out there that don't know where to find you, where can they find Raffle out on the interwebs?
YouTube.com/Raffle, Twitch.tv/Raffle, and then at RaffleHS on Instagram and Twitter, where I am not always terribly active, but daily videos over on the YouTube and streams 5 days a week.
I can't reiterate, guys, he's an awesome content creator and an awesome guy in general. Make sure you guys support his content. Of course, you can find me over on YouTube if you made your way over here. But you can also find me on Twitter and Twitch at GetMeOut as well. We appreciate all of you guys for watching. We hope you're enjoying Hearthstone this week, and we will see you guys next time. Later.